common ground. An essay by James Mahu. Question: why is it so important to repeat an aspiration or wish? It seems like one prayer should be enough if we truly trusted the intelligence of our local universe. Why do we need to repeat the prayer or the wish we desire to manifest? An affirmation, once made, should be enough. Right? Answer: it is not for the intelligence of one and all that we repeat our wishes and desires. It is for our finite selves that we find repetition to have value in regards to our goals and aspirations. This is because the finite self lives in space-time duality. That particular lens of our infinite self perceives space-time, which is spread out in separate moments. Separate periods of space-time. In these separate periods of space-time, our repetition reminds us of our goals and aspirations. These goals and aspirations are influenced by fear or love, and all of its variations. They always resonate with both the mind and heart, thoughts and feelings. They guide us, because these thoughts and feelings construct our belief system. Thus, where we are guided from is just as important, if not more important, than where we are guided to. The from and the to are correlative. If we are guided from our finite self, we are guided to earthly aspirations. If we are guided from our infinite self, we are attracted to the knowledge of who we are and why we are here. Our thoughts and feelings hear the whispers of our infinite self. We prioritize the acquisition of this knowledge. Both finite and infinite aspirations are compatible, they simply require balance. Both the aspirations of the finite self and the infinite self can be sought simultaneously. They can be braided together in a partnership, and this partnership allows them to become the centerpiece of our local universe, around which all else flows. And this is done in the domain of physical action, emotional expression, mental analysis, and imaginative exploration, and all of those dimensions beyond, too numerous to mention. We are reminders of ourselves. This is our highest calling as finite beings. We remind our finite self that we are an infinite self that is one and all. We are both a sovereign lens of learning and an integral network of knowing. We exist in all of that first and foremost, and we exist in one space-time, simultaneously. We are one consciousness of a planetary nature, that is one consciousness of a galactic nature, that is one consciousness of a universal nature, that is one consciousness of a multiversal nature. And that consciousness is one and all. That consciousness is unknowable to our species in this space-time, yet it remains our sustenance and core existence. Space-time duality is the reason this consciousness is unknowable. Space-time, in itself, creates duality. From the two-dimensional space-time, there is duality. And the plurality of the dimensions therefrom are also of duality, and this duality is strongest in the fourth dimension where the mind and emotions operate. It exists in all dimensions, because it does not exist in the one dimension. In the expanding, infinite plurality of dimensions, the vibratory rate of the dimensions refine. Duality becomes a lesser attractor in the higher dimensions. As humans, our space-time duality is why we must remind ourselves of our aspirations. Duality in the fourth dimension is a powerful attractor. Our minds and hearts are being attracted to this duality in every moment of our existence. However, what attracts our attention in a particular moment always contains the potential to be perceived through the lens of our infinite self connected to one and all. We can observe our local universe as if we are one and all, looking through an infinite self, looking through a finite self into a local universe within space-time duality. That is us. This unique and powerful perspective does not need to be held onto. It does not desire to be. It is behind everything we do. It cannot be otherwise. We can bring it forth into our local universe through behaviors of imperfect, unconditional love. And while it might be imperfect behavior, it is nonetheless honoring our source and sustainer, and the intelligence from which we arise, and to whom we are consigned. Let's ask ourselves a question: how can we have too much faith in the thing that created us? Not the creation of our finite self. Rather, our infinite self. If we believe that we possess an infinite self that is interconnected with one and all, how can that infinite self exist if it were not created by the intelligence of one and all? And if it were created by such an intelligence, regardless of how this intelligence is deformed and restricted by space-time duality, we still place our faith in it. And how could this faith be anything but imperfect, subjective, and unique, thus, unjudgeable? And yet, all of us know, at our very core, in the privacy of our inmost heart, that we are infinite there. We are connected there with one and all. And hardly one of us, in all of the human lives that have come before and will come after us, have had this experience in a physical human body. Perhaps 1 in a million human beings remember this experience, while the rest of us rely on the paranormal, synchronicities, and faith in the face of realities that seem indifferent, and at their worst, mean-spirited. The reminders are everywhere in our local universe. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they are silent. Sometimes they shout at us. Sometimes they appear magically from some obscure corner of our lives. Whatever the case, we are reminded of this infinite nature that is in us and all life. Not a single particle of a single atom is excluded. Existence is itself a reminder that we are infinite. We remind ourselves to notice our infinite nature, to embody it enough where we desire to be partners with it, to extend our free will to it and say, let's build our perspective together. Let's be aligned with one another, even when it's a bumpy ride. Let's live as a sovereign that is integral to all life without judgment. In doing this, we are creating an acceptance of our local universe as a multiversal exploration that will ultimately remind us of who we are. When duality becomes the continuum of imperfect, unconditional love, our local universe transforms. Not because anything or anyone changed on the outside, but because we did inside our finite self. The external reflects the internal causes. We figured out that the infinite self exists. We figured out that our finite self can live in harmony with our infinite self. That they can become partners because the infinite self embodies the finite self, they one being. We figured out that that partnership is what we will interpret from, and express into, our local universe. And we figured out that the thing our partnership will interpret and express is imperfect, unconditional love and kindness. All of the other functions of the finite self to be successful, financially independent, healthy, and wise, all of those are handled by the partnership. The finite self simply needs to remind itself that this is what's happening in our life, and it is not an imaginary, fantasy world. It is a transformation of the real world and a representation of how we create our local universe. Our finite self is a deformation of our infinite self, because space-time duality in the fourth dimension is so very limiting to the human mind, our interface with space-time duality. The infinite self will speak with us through the human mind when we form the partnership. It will listen to us. It will watch us. It will care for us. It will arrange our local universe for us. But all of these things our infinite self is always doing, even when we don't see it, hear it, or even feel it. It is us. Our infinite self, living in the fourth dimension of thought and emotions, is temporarily confused by this thing we call the human interface. We simply don't understand that we're experiencing our infinite self, because we're distracted. What our finite self experiences is a murky division of life in an existential moment of spacetime inside a universe of unknown qualities. And the missing component in all of that is the infinite self and the partnership we can make. This is a reminder to ourselves to realize the infinite self within and to begin the partnership across all dimensions of spacetime in which we exist as a finite self. Every reminder we speak, feel, or think is a reminder to our finite self that our infinite self awaits our invitation to reveal itself to us. We cannot remind ourselves that we are an infinite being with an assemblage of words. Our reminders live in our beliefs. And in our core beliefs, we know we are infinite in an infinite multiverse. We live in infinite life forms in infinite spacetimes. Infinite simply means a number is too abstract to define quantity. Our affirmations and aspirations tend to be realistic goals of survival in an existential world for which we have an unknown degree of control. What we can control is our attention. We can decide where we place our attention within our local universe. Internally, we have the potential to control our emotions, thoughts, and imaginative explorations. The internal us is not merely a pattern of thoughts. Every thought is part of an imaginative idea and a felt emotion. The substance of our internal world is the amalgam of the imagination, thought, emotion, and memory all working together to create the external world of our local universe. Inside, we create the outside. And this is true for all life forms. The internal flow of imagination, thought, feeling, and memory is not sequential, nor is it a process. It is a reaction to the external, or it is an action of the internal. Externally, we experience where our internal attention is placed. And this choice is ours to make. Behavioral intelligence is external, creational belief is internal, and this has always been a choice, a part of our free will. And with this choice, we have freedom, and this is because the sovereign path is all internal. It has no aspect of itself that is external. It cannot be externalized except through our behavior, and the behavior of the sovereign path is imperfect, unconditional love and kindness. The choice to externalize the internal workings of the sovereign path is really the choice of interpreting and expressing imperfect, unconditional love and kindness within our local universe. We live not as a beacon, example, acolyte or master. Anything that is of a hierarchy cannot survive for very long on the sovereign path. Instead, we bring the internal infinite into the external finite. We introduce them into our local universe. We intermingle them in the privacy of our external world. This builds trust. Trust between the finite and the infinite braids them together. The trust is gathered through the partnership. This can be done without a single external person being aware of it, and this is because there are no trips to a church. There are no books to read. There are no hymns to sing. There are liturgies to recite. There is no absolute truth to be proselytized. There are no prayers to speak. There is no master to hear. Rather, it is a very clear and empirical recollection of who we are and what we can be within spacetime duality. Perhaps this sounds alienating to imply that we are not a member of some community? Not part of a hierarchy that we can depend on? No common ground upon which we all stand? Well, that is the irony. We all stand on that same ground. The communities we have built are tribal in nature and separate us. The partnership of the finite and infinite in spacetime duality, interpreting and expressing imperfect, unconditional love and kindness within our local universe, that is our common ground. Initially, it may feel alienating, as if once the common ground is found we feel isolated, but that is only because we have mistaken the shadows of the common ground as the same as the common ground itself, when indeed, the shadows bear little resemblance. It can take time to understand the common ground, perceiving it in its entirety. That is part of the partnership unfolding. Like a flower that opens its petals to the sunlight, we open our partnership of the finite and infinite to the behavior that locates, identifies, and transmits the common ground. That is how we find it, and it finds us. When it does, we no longer feel alienated or alone or lost or searching, unless, of course, we desire to experience those ideas. All of this can seem improbable from a realistic perspective. We can say things like, "Oh, I have a spouse that would never listen to my thoughts or feelings if I was expressing any of this stuff. They'd look at me like a crazy person, like one who was trying to isolate, not connect." Yes, that may be true if you put it into words and lecture others. That is my point. There is no lecture. There is behavior, and for the purpose of this essay, words are not behavior. They verbalize thoughts and feelings. If our behaviors of imperfect, unconditional love and kindness are off-putting to our spouse, family, colleagues, associates, neighbors, and citizens at large, then let them choose their path. Once the sovereign path to our common ground is found, it cannot be lost. Its will is singular, it desires only to unveil new aspects of its infinite self. The petals cannot close, they can only pause. There is no catching up to one who stands on the common ground, because we are all there, hence, common ground. There is no learning of a process that separates one from another. You cannot understand the sovereign path or common ground by words. Only through experience of a self-willed nature can we begin to understand how to understand it. By reading these essays, we have demonstrated a self-willed nature. Our behavior is attracting these particular words and images, and they in turn are linking our imaginative exploration, our thoughts and feelings, and our memory and awareness of our subconscious nature. And all of these elements are being brought together internally, within us, like a collective light that brightens an entire local universe. The whole purpose of the sovereign path is to lead the finite self to the common ground of the infinite self. The common ground may only be the size of a single point, yet it encompasses all of us without exception. It is the principle of the one dimension, it is both encompassing and unitary. Where and when we experience our common ground, we are anything but common.